Hey everybody, we're back with Professor Thomas Schwartz here on Open Line on a Tuesday night, taking your calls, talking about what's happening in the world of politics right now, and that is a pretty wide open, broad topic, so as you imagine, you have a lot to say, and we appreciate it. Real quick, I just want to say, Dr. Schwartz, what is it specifically, like when the fall semester comes around, what level, what do you teach? What classes do you lead?
I'll be teaching a class on the Cold War, the history of the Cold War,
okay.
Which really is, I think, relevant today. And then I teach a small seminar on post-war America, which deals with both domestic and foreign topics, and post-war by post-World War II, which is still, I'm more of a historian than a political scientist in that
Fantastic.
way. Yeah.
Great. Well, all right, good luck with those. Let's go back to the phone lines, and here comes Lucy with something to say.
Hey, Lucy. Hey, Professor, that's what I've been doing for 2 weeks late at night, sitting in my underwear, is going over old documentaries about the Cold War, because I'm trying to figure out what is going on right now with Putin's poodle, and that's how I feel about it, because I have served my country, and I don't know what that man in the White House is doing. I am an independent and have been since 1968. I voted for Republicans and Democrats, and I am a native Tennessean, so I guess what I have voted for are moderates. And as far as this stand your ground law, that is something that's out of the libertarian wing of politics. These are the same people who put Reagan in office back in 1980. They start calling themselves the Tea Party. That is what Trump has turned the Republican Party into, is the Libertarian Party. They don't believe in democracy. They believe in liberty. That's a big difference. It's like my rights trump yours, no pun intended, and that's how life is, and that's how it's going to go. But what's really concerning me is you look how he's called out President Trump revoking these clearances of these learned men who contribute to our defense, and he's going to revoke their clearances. Flynn had a clearance.
Yeah.
And he was going to put a bag on that Turkish imam's head and send him to Turkey, offer up him to Turkey. Now, that's got me bothered because Turkey was allowing ISIS to go back and forth across their borders. And I'm wondering now, what was that all about?
All right, let's hold you right there, because I can tell
I'm wound up. I'm going to hang up, okay?
I know. All right, Lucy, listen to what we have to say, because she got into some things that I think it was maybe a trial balloon floated with the threatening to revoke the security clearance of some of these people who President Trump doesn't think so highly of, Comey and the like from the last administration holdovers. But of course, I think a lot of people have said that's not a good idea. It's not going to set a very good precedent.
Well, and you know, Comey actually lost his clearance when he was fired. I mean, that was it was more of this Brennan and others that have been critical of him, and to a certain extent, this is Trump at his most personal. I mean, they're calling him talking about treason and that, so he's responding in this way. But I think in the end, this is below the president to do this, and not that he might not. I mean, he still has authority to do it, and he may follow it up and do it, but I do think it would set a bad precedent, and it would also, I think, reflect badly on him.
Lucy mentioned, saying that she's an independent and she considers herself a moderate. Do you think in today's political world why is the word moderate just, it seems like a dirty word, because we're so partisan, hyper partisan.
Right.
And I've heard conservative pundits say, if you stand in the middle of the road, you get hit by the traffic.
Right.
And I've heard moderates defend themselves, say, no, if you stand in the middle of the road, you direct traffic. So it really depends on your point of view, right?
It does. Moderates are always, at different times, especially in polarized times, find themselves under attack. I do think the polarization in both parties, the fact that Democrats in some ways have moved to the left and the Republicans have become such a party of Trump, even though in some ways Trump was not as classically conservative as, say, the last Republican president, George W. Bush, was.
Right.
Even though, because of his sort of character and style, and particularly some of the issues he's chosen to emphasize, I think that polarization has intensified. So it is hard sometimes for people to find the middle ground. But I do think to go back to Bredesen, I do think that's what some of his ads are pointing out, the idea of problem solving. Let's do things. And that still appeals to people when they look at the gridlock in Washington, when they look at nothing being done. So.
Yeah, like I always tell people, I used to live in Maine many years ago, started my career there. We talked about this last night. When Susan Collins was just starting out in politics, and I met her and knew her pretty well. And now she's Senator Collins, and the former governor of Maine, independent governor, is independent Senator Angus King, who caucuses with the Democrats. But you talk about a state where they'd like to send independent and
yes.
Susan Collins, some in the Republican Party can't stand her because they think she and Lisa Murkowski, I think from Alaska, and a few others who are very moderate, but
well, they prevented the repeal of Obamacare.
That's right.
They will never be forgiven for that.
No, they won't. It's just fascinating to watch, but they will still be sent back. The people of those states like that about them.
Yeah.
So there are some areas of the country where, that's
well, I think in that
wants.
sense, in a way, it'd be interesting because this Senate race could show whether Tennessee still leans in that direction or whether we're more like Maine.
A good friend of News Channel 5, Reverend Enoch Fuzz, is on the line. Hello, Reverend.
Hey, Roy and Dr. Schwartz. Thank you. Let me tell you, a few days ago I was looking for what had happened, what the black vote had been in Alabama with the Roy Moore thing.
Yes, sir.
And I came across, Dr. Schwartz, you heard of the Pew Report?
Yeah.
Came across one of their reports that said that the African American vote declined for the first time in 20 years in 2016. And it decreased by 765,000.
Now, does that surprise you?
Well, as I looked at it, I said, well, maybe they don't realize how the Russian interference could have hurt voter turnout. I think of the black vote, that it does not turn out in an election where there's a lot of competitiveness, the kind of stuff, the nasty stuff, the dirty elections, the mudslinging. I think that discourages black vote turnout. And then the other point was I'm noticing what y'all calling polarization of people, and Republican, Democrat, really the president. I'm hearing folks just can't, they either have disdain for him or they really think he's doing a great job. And that's why a lot of my Republican friends, associates, they're friends, but they really support President Trump. And a lot of Democrats, and like my church members, they can't stand President Trump.
Right.
And I'm seeing this, disdain for people. But one great example I see here in Nashville, and I think this is funny, there's a company, Freeman Webb Company, and Freeman is the top Democrat in the state, and Webb is the top Republican, but they have one of the largest, most successful businesses together, a Republican and a Democrat. And when I look at that, I say, where does this polarization come from that we can't get along beyond politics?
Yeah, I agree. Reverend, thank you for your call. We always appreciate your insight.
Okay.
Have a good night. Let's go to Taylor next. Hey, Taylor.
Good evening, gentlemen.
How are you, sir?
My favorite subject here.
Okay.
I want to say something about the governor's race, but first I'd like to say, Roy, this press release you got from Bredesen is so Bredesen. That man will not be voting in this Kavanaugh thing, so it's so easy for him to take a position like that since he's not going to be voting.
Right.
But I can imagine if he were sitting in the Senate with Schumer over his shoulder, his moderation.
You bring up a good point, Taylor. I mean, things do change when you get to Washington, and there's a lot of pressure from both parties, the party leaders. Absolutely. Yeah.
That was my one point. So far, there's only one of 49 Democratic senators that have agreed to even meet with Kavanaugh. But my second point is the governor's race. I'm very much a Republican, and this primary, I went into the primary with no particular candidate picked out of the four.
Okay.
But two of these candidates have come out with the most deceptive ads. I mean, what the content of those ads are, such as donations to 3 different mayors.
Right. Now, what?
Any good businessman that does a lot of business in the city of Nashville makes a donation to the mayor just like he pays his water bill. That doesn't mean he...
That's a good point.
One thing about those policies, and I have decided Mr. Lee is by far the gentleman in this race. So that's my points, and anything you want to say about that, I'll be glad to listen.
Yeah, going back to the ads, thank you, Taylor. It's been interesting in this race because we have not yet seen real polling. Just recently, this analytics, JMC Analytics, I think, came out with a poll, and right away the Boyd campaign challenged the validity of the poll that showed Bill Lee in a slight lead. But we know, just in general, that their internal polls, judged on the ads that they run, that it's a tight race.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially among those 3. Randy Boyd and Diane Black and Bill Lee, with Beth Harwell trailing a little bit in fourth. But Bill Lee has decided to try to take the high road.
Yes.
As far as his ads, and even talks about it in one of his ads. He's going to let the other 2 kind of fight it out, duke it out, and he's trying to take the high road. And now Beth Harwell, the Speaker of the House, has also come out with an ad basically saying she's the only adult in the room, showing the kids fighting. What's your take on this?
I really, it's fascinating to see 4 candidates that seem to have a strong campaign, seem to be financed, seem to be able to run ads. It's interesting to me, of course, how at least 2 of them very much embrace President Trump. Both the Boyd and the Diane Black, and try to make a point of who is more loyal. Bill Lee has a certain distance from that. At the same time as he supports most of the positions.
And he's almost taking that, what you call George W. Bush, the classical conservative stance.
Much more so. And I mean, if he were to, he would not be, he'd certainly support President Trump, but he seems to have a certain character difference, that he's setting himself up to be more in line with the sort of traditional, maybe with Governor Haslam, with where Haslam has been, where Haslam had problems with Trump before the election, was actually quite distant from Trump until he was elected.
It's fascinating. And we, remember, right here on News Channel 5 Plus next Thursday night, we've got a 2-hour election special. It's going to be a really interesting night to see how these things play out, and Diane Black in the 6th district, there's a couple of people there duking it out to get the Republican nomination to replace her, John Rose and Bob Corlew. I mean, there's a lot going on. We have a lot to cover. All right, let's go. I'll tell you what, we'll take our break. Is that all right? We'll take a break and take more of your calls. We got some folks on hold. Be patient. We'll get to you right after this. Thanks.